The Vietnam War is arguably the most controversial military intervention in American history. It was objectively disastrous for everyone involved, and ever since, nearly every film about it has been at least somewhat critical of it. Even We Were Soldiers, which offers a more nuanced view of the war, does well at portraying the futility of it. But while most films critical of it use drama to expose its moral quandaries, one film stands out for often using humor instead. Really dark humor. Here's everything you need to know about the classic anti-war film, Full Metal Jacket. In early 1980, Stanley Kubrick reaches out to Michael Herr, a war journalist most famous today for writing Dispatches, a memoir about his reporting on the Vietnam War. They meet up, and Kubrick tells Herr he wants to make another war film, but is still looking for a story to adapt. Flash forward 2 years later, and Kubrick reads The Short Timers, a book Gustav Hasford wrote based on his experiences in the Vietnam War. Kubrick loves it and decides this is the story he wants to turn into a movie. Over the next year, Kubrick dug into archives looking at hundreds of old photos and old Vietnamese newspapers to research the war. He also consulted Hasford directly as he came up with a script for the film. Meanwhile, he spent a considerable amount of time trying to convince Herr to share his Vietnam War experiences with him. Herr was hesitant at first, but eventually agreed to help out, and both Hasford and Herr read over the first draft of the script and suggested changes. Ultimately, Hasford and Herr contributed quite a bit to the screenplay. Kubrick decided to call the movie Full Metal Jacket after coming across the phrase in a gun catalog. It's just the name of a type of bullet, by the way. Warner Brothers agreed to help Kubrick with whatever he needed. No one knows for sure how much the company spent on production, but it may have been as much as $30 million. First was casting. While Bruce Willis, Anthony Michael Hall, and Val Kilmer were all considered for the role of Private Joker, ultimately Kubrick went with Matthew Modine. Kubrick appreciated Modine's performance in the film Birdie in particular. Kubrick chose Vincent D'Onofrio to play Private Gomer Pyle, but required him to gain weight for the role. He ended up putting on about 70 pounds. Probably the most iconic role was that of the drill instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. Kubrick originally offered the role to Ed Harris, but Harris turned it down, later calling his decision, quote, foolish. Meanwhile, Kubrick was already working with an actual U.S. Marine drill instructor during the Vietnam War, R. Lee Ermey, who was just helping out as a technical advisor. When Ermey asked Kubrick if he could audition for the role of Hartman, Kubrick didn't think he was vicious enough to play the character. Now he was literally basing this off of watching Ermey perform as a drill instructor already in the movie The Boys and Company C. Well, Ermey disagreed, and he videotaped himself improvising insults at actors wanting to play Marines, and after Kubrick saw that tape, he became convinced and gave him the part. While Ermey rehearsed his lines, Kubrick's assistant, Leon Vitali, would throw stuff at him. Ermey then would have to catch the stuff and throw it back as quickly as possible while saying his lines as fast as he could. Any slip up meant starting the lines completely over. Later, Ermey said of Vitali, quote, he was my drill instructor. Ultimately, though, Ermey improvised quite a bit during filming, and Kubrick later estimated that Ermey wrote about half of his lines, especially with the insults. Kubrick filmed Full Metal Jacket all over England between August 1985 and August 1986. Nope, nowhere near Vietnam. Kubrick, who lived in England at the time, didn't want to fly to the other side of the world, so he transformed England into this. Believe it or not, he had a giant plastic replica jungle flown in from California, but once it all got there, he regretted the decision, saying, quote, I don't like it. Get rid of it. Kubrick was very particular about making sure the trees were authentic, though. He ultimately imported around 200 actual Spanish Spanish palm trees to make the locations more authentic. Kubrick shot the boot camp scenes at Basingbourn Barracks, a former Royal Air Force station and British Army base. Much of the filming took place at Beckton Gas Works, an abandoned gasworks in London, believe it or not. It was a toxic environment. Quite literally. It had been contaminated with asbestos and lots of other carcinogens. To make sure the actors playing recruits' reactions to Ermi were more authentic, Kubrick made sure Ermi and the recruits did not rehearse together. On some days while filming, Ermi yelled at them for as much as 10 hours. It's amazing he didn't lose his voice. Oh, and yes, the recruits all shave their heads at least once a week for continuity. Many of the extras at boot camp were actual British soldiers. Kubrick, as he typically did, made his actors redo takes over and over and over. Supposedly, when Modine found out his wife was having an emergency C-section, Kubrick didn't want him to leave, so Modine threatened to cut his hand open with a pocket knife unless Kubrick let him go be with her. Kubrick's daughter, Vivian, not only wrote the film's score, but also shot a bunch of behind-the-scenes footage. Full Metal Jacket premiered on June 17th, 1987. Over the following weeks, it expanded to hundreds of theaters around the world. Ultimately, it was a success, making at least $120 million at the box office. Critics also generally praised it, and today it's often considered one of the greatest war films ever created. That said, several critics were more harsh of the second part of the film, set in Vietnam, saying it hurt the overall message of the film. Full Metal Jacket won several awards. It's currently certified 91% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes and is one of the highest rated films of all time on IMDb. While you should definitely watch it yourself, here is the basic storyline. At the height of the Vietnam War, we see new recruits arrive for Marine Corps boot camp. Among them, J.T. Davis, who gets the nickname Joker after interrupting the drill instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, with a John Wayne impersonation. Also among the recruits is Leonard Lawrence, who is a bit slow at learning and out of shape. He gets the nickname Gomer after the character Gomer Pyle from The Andy Griffith Show. The drill sergeant Hartman is brutal, to say the least, completely shredding any resemblance of confidence they may have in themselves. Throughout the training, it's evident that Hartman's goal is not only to make them combat ready, but willing and able to kill. As Gomer struggles in boot camp, Hartman puts Joker in charge of helping him improve. Gomer gets bullied and broken down to a point where he might be having a mental breakdown. The second portion of the film takes place in South Vietnam, still following Joker with different characters. By now, Joker is a sergeant and a journalist traveling with a fellow journalist known as Private First Class Rafterman, based in Da Nang. They are seeing little action, but that quickly changes after the Tet Offensive begins, and Joker and Rafterman are sent to Phu Bai. There, Joker reunites with his friend Sergeant Cowboy, who he knew at boot camp, and for the rest of the film, we follow Cowboy's group through the Battle of Hue and an ambush. That's basically it. I promise you, there's no spoilers here.
Toward the end of basic training, Gunnery Sergeant Hartman says to the squad,
"The Marine Corps does not want robots. The Marine Corps wants killers."
But what's the difference? It's a curious distinction to make, especially when basic training is full of rigid discipline, absolute submission to authority, and the transformation of individuals into a homogenized group that acts as one. So if it's not mechanical compliance that creates a killer, what is it? I think the answer lies in the unique genre that Full Metal Jacket occupies: the dark comedy. Contra many American war films of the era, Full Metal Jacket is largely devoid of sentimentality or melodrama. In fact, there's nary a serious moment. The film is mostly soldiers relentlessly roasting each other, Hartman humiliating recruits with legendary one-liners, John Wayne impersonations, innuendos about each other's mothers, crotch-grabbing, STD jokes, and battlefield eulogies that quickly devolve into a discussion of poontang. Although it may be tempting to discount these obscenities as trivial, I think they're actually crucial to understanding the phenomenon of military group psychology that the film is so preoccupied with. Because in order to create a squad of killers, you need dedication to the cause, and ideology. And for philosopher Slavoj Žižek, an ideology is able to most effectively control us when it's held by its subjects at a slight distance, or held with a little dose of irony. As if in some way the recruits are not taking their mission as killers entirely seriously. In the film, obscene comedy is the mechanism by which the squad keeps their mission to kill the Viet Cong at a distance, and Hartman uses this lurid comedy so popular in military culture as a way to get the squad to systemically dissociate with their mission to become killers. For example, when Hartman tells the soldiers that their rifle is the only sexual action they're gonna get, he's exercising his incontestable authority with a kind of a wry wink. He's telling a joke, almost bribing the squad with a little bit of obscene joy. There's a kind of unspoken social contract between Hartman and the squad. They live the hell of basic training, and in return, he gives them the salacious pleasure of a dirty joke. And importantly, these jokes don't compromise his authority. On the contrary, they strengthen it, because for Žižek, subjects are more likely to submit to authority when they think they're getting pleasure and freedom. Indeed, the importance of crudeness continues on the battlefield, enabling them to cope with the horrors of war by using dark comedy to regularly dissociate from the utter seriousness of life in a war zone. Even when Joker, who of course jokes, says that he joined the Marine Corps to kill, there's a sense that he's being ironic.
I wanted to be the first kid on my block to get a confirmed kill.
After all, he iconically has a helmet that says "Born to Kill" and a peace button on his lapel. The juxtaposition itself is a representation of the dissonance one has to juggle in order to be effective in a war zone. It's very difficult to turn human beings into robotic killing machines. Doing so requires them to actually believe that their killing is just, which is difficult especially for a conflict as unpopular as the Vietnam War. It's much more effective to turn them into a band of jokers who can be made comfortable killing with the knowledge that given the freedom, they may have chosen otherwise. Like the Rolling Stones song in the film's end credits, in order to deal with the horror of war, sometimes you've got to use humor to paint it black.
Not only are there so many freaking war movies out there, but there's a lot of actually pretty good ones. Full Metal Jacket definitely stands out as a good one. Strangely though, other Vietnam War films continue to get way more love from critics and are just more popular overall. And yet, while Full Metal Jacket seems to become increasingly overshadowed by other great war films in recent years, it has still had a long-lasting impact on how many people view not just war, but joining the military. 35 years later, we still laugh at this film, even though we might feel guilty laughing. Hartman's rants, in particular, continue to provide countless opportunities for memes, despite being pretty offensive today. Full Metal Jacket, in fact, may be a big reason why we still accept the brutal nature of boot camp. Strangely enough, there is even evidence the boot camp scenes may have even inspired more Marines to enlist. The line,
"Me love you long time, me so horny,"
ultimately became a catchphrase and was sampled in rap songs. But we all still recognize that this is a serious film. Full Metal Jacket managed to not only raise awareness of the brutality of combat, but the harrowing nature of abuse recruits can endure. It doesn't have a happy ending. There is not much of a resolution other than just being alive. And while the film is technically an anti-war film, Kubrick never referred to it as such. And today it's one of those rare war films that both pacifists and veterans respect. Indeed, it's probably the best war film ever made to capture the collective doublethink we tell ourselves about war. War is evil and absurd. War is necessary and noble. It's a constant contradiction that this scene in particular captures.
You write "Born to Kill" on your helmet and you wear a peace button.
Simply put, no other film seems to have captured the absurdity of war quite like Full Metal Jacket. Okay, I'd better be upfront with you here. I had nothing to do with the analysis portion of this video. That was all Jared Bauer. Yep, the co-founder of Wisecrack, who now has his own channels on YouTube and Twitch, in which he offers more brilliant analyses on a variety of art. Be sure to go over to his channels to subscribe. It was an honor to collaborate with him on this. Full Metal Jacket is certainly my favorite anti-war film of all time, but what's yours? Also, Kubrick is among my favorite directors. What do you think of this movie? Also, which movies should I cover next on this channel? Let me know down below, and thanks for watching.